Welcome everyone to our educational webinar, Cannabis Farming Basics for the Home Grower with Daniel Fink, owner of Down Home Farms. Today is part one, where we will be covering germination, genetics, and garden prep. Today's Thursday, November 6, 2025. My name is Erin, and I'm the Educational and Communications Manager here at the Cannabis Alliance. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. It is our hope that anyone interested in commercial cannabis here in Nevada County will take the time to tune into these webinars, educate themselves, and continue to be or become stewards of the environment and of our community. Our educational series provides general cannabis education to the public, as well as the preparation necessary to assist in securing a local cultivation permit and state cultivation license. The series includes webinars, support groups, business skills training, and a mentor program. And of course, all webinars are online, they're free of charge, and they are open to the public. So what is the Alliance? We are a nonprofit trade association representing the local cannabis community here in Nevada County. Our mission is to support public policy initiatives through representative advocacy, provide educational opportunities, and create space for connection within the industry and the greater community. Some services that we provide to our members are a consistent voice and representation locally and at the statewide level, monthly educational webinars to assist with permitting and licensing, as well as general cannabis education, much like the one you are on today, a buddy program to pair permitted farmers with new farmers, and industry mixers and networking events. So there are ways you can stay in touch with the Alliance. You can become a member. We just started a new community membership that is open to the general public. This is for non-permitted members of the community who want to join forces with the Alliance and support our work. It's just $25 a year, and that member support has really enabled the Cannabis Alliance to make an extraordinary impact by helping to enact policies that support our locally licensed cannabis community and help to create economic resilience in our county. You can email me, Erin, it's ERIN, at nccannabisalliance.org, or you can give us a call at our office. It's 530-264-7376. I will link all of these ways to stay in touch in the chat as well. And the way that you can reach us by becoming a member is go to our website. That's nccannabisalliance.org/membership. You can also become a sponsor. If you are a business in Nevada County that works in the cannabis industry or is looking to connect with the cannabis industry, we would love for you to support our organization in that way and to join forces as well. That is same place on our website, nccannabisalliance.org/sponsorship. You can follow us on Instagram. We are at Nevada County Alliance, and as well as Facebook, it's the same link at Nevada County Alliance. We have a bi-monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to. We have, updates about policy, news, events that we're doing, educational webinar information, etc. You can, again, go to our website, nccannabisalliance.org/subscribe. And any additional questions, you can just email me, again, Erin at nccannabisalliance.org. Some upcoming webinars that we have that you will be interested in checking out are part 2 and part 3 of the webinar that we're doing today. So Cannabis Farming Basics for the Home Grower webinar series. Part 2 is January 8th. We're going to be covering soil health, nutrition, and pest control. And then part 3 is March 5th, drying, curing, and storing your harvest. Also presented by yours truly, Daniel Fink. And we're really excited to have you again here, Daniel. Thanks for being here. So whether you want to sharpen your skills or you're new to growing, this series is really packed with insider knowledge for the home grower, so you don't want to miss those part 2 and part 3. Mark your calendars. I'll link those in the chat as well. Some upcoming webinars for the licensed industry include traditional ag farming operations and statewide legislation and local policy, so don't miss out on those. I want to give a shout out to our allied industry business sponsors. We have Ag Natural, Cramner Engineering, Plan Air Landscaping Architecture, Humboldt Seed Company, Mr. B's Green Trees, Gold Coast Botanicals, and Elevation 2477. So the format of today's webinar is Daniel Fink will be giving a presentation with a Q&A to follow if you have questions. Your participation is very encouraged. We have a chat section here and a Q&A section. Feel free to use both of those. I'll be monitoring them, and we can have a session after the presentation to go over any questions you may have. And of course, ask any questions that you do have to make this webinar more useful for everyone. So that's it for me. Diana, do you have anything to add before we pass it over to Daniel?
I don't. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank
All
you,
right.
Daniel, for hosting this with us.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for being here, everyone. And I'll pass it to Daniel to introduce himself.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Really grateful to be here. It's a pleasure and an honor to share what I've learned along the way to other people that are seeking their own pathway to growing their own medicine. We prepared a little slideshow today, so let me see if I can get this going. Okay, what's that look like?
Looks good on my end. I see the Down Home Farms, Salama, and the
Okay,
Home
now
Growers Guide
just
to the Universe.
okay. All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Today, like was mentioned, is the first of three-part series on home growing basics. Today, we're going to be covering a couple different topics. Generally, this is going to be about germination, genetic selection, and garden preparation. If you're getting suggestions from me, I'm always going to be leaning towards the organic and regenerative side. Those that don't know me or know Down Home Farms, Down Home Farms is proudly one of the smallest legal cannabis farms in the whole state of California. We strive to close as many loops as possible, making our own compost and worm castings with the help of our animal friends, as I have my rooster approaching me right now. He's trying to get my feet. We have a small pack of alpacas that we use to supply fodder for the compost and worm farm. And we have a brand out there on dispensary shelves throughout the state of California. We're very proud to be one of the founding members of Farm Cut Cannabis brand, as well as our house brand, Down Home Farms Alpaca Powered Flowers. Let's get going. Okay. Starting with germination procedures, you always want to make sure that your seeds are very viable. You want to make sure that your seed comes from a recent batch whenever possible, or has been kept, as it says on the screen, in a cool, dark, dry condition, ideally with silica packs to prevent them from receiving any moisture. To start strong, it's really important to even test seed viability. So for every plant that you're trying to grow, you would want to have multiple seeds. Let's say you're trying to grow 6 outdoor plants in your backyard. You would want to start with 12 or 18 or even 24 seeds. That way you can pick the ones that are the most viable out of the batch and have the most vigor. When it comes to sprouting, you can choose soaking, paper towel method, or direct sow methods. We'll get into each one of those. Each has its pros and cons in terms of speed of germination, control you have over the growth, and the stress that the plant will experience when you transplant it into its next stage. Like it says on the screen, ideal germination happens around 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit with 80% humidity. So that's high humidity for good seed germination. And that would continue for the first couple weeks. You want gentle light. You do not want high-powered lights over seedlings. Typically, even a sunny window is plenty of light to germinate seeds. And again, on the screen, it speaks about damping off, prevent damping off of biologicals like Bacillus subtilis or Trichoderma. Damping off is when your seedling pops out of the ground And then a day or two later, it just falls over, and it's because it has a spot of rot on it. And so you can use beneficial bacterias like Bacillus subtilis or Trichoderma to help prevent fungal infections at that stage. Um, Handling your transplants extremely gently is very important. Typically, when the taproot gets to quarter or half an inch, that applies to the following. So we'll come back. This is what we call the paper towel method. You can see that is a moist paper towel that the seeds were folded into. And when the taproots start to appear, you would very carefully unwrap the paper towel, pick up each seed carefully, and then place it into your soil, being a very small pot. I'll show you that in just a moment. If you're direct planting, uh, if you're direct planting seeds, it would look like this. You can see it's very shallow. It's not a deep hole. When it comes to seed planting in general, whether we're talking about cannabis or vegetables, a rule of thumb is only bury it about twice as deep as the seed is wide on its widest edge. So that's really only a few millimeters, quarter, half inch beneath the soil. If you plant it too deep, it will delay the germination and the seed will take a very long time to come up, or it may not at all. This is another option. This is what you're seeing in the middle is a peat plug sitting in a pot of clay balls. So this is more of a hydra method, but that peat plug, sometimes called a jiffy plug or a quick root, those are spongy little cubes that fit into a planting tray, and you place the seed into a pre-punched hole in the center. And those are nice because they regulate moisture very well. They are somewhat hard to overwater. Um, and because they're made of somewhat natural ingredients, it's preferred when you're starting lots and lots of seeds. This is the water soak method. You're looking at a glass of water with seeds germinating 2 inches under the surface of the water. It would take typically 12 to 24 hours for a fresh, healthy seed to start to show a taproot, as you see in this picture. And then once the taproot appears, which is that small white part coming out of the seeds, you would then take the seeds out and place them approximately a quarter of an inch under the surface of the soil into a cup that looks like this. These are solo cups, commonly referred to as solo cups. These seedlings were direct sown into the soil and they sprouted right there in the cups. But cups like this make a great option for what we call uppotting or transplanting your seedlings once they've germinated in any of the other methods we've discussed. You do have to cut drainage holes on the bottom of these. If you don't, they will drown. So you make sure you cut drainage holes if you're going to use solo cups. Be sure to put any questions you have as I'm going onto the webinar chat. I am able to see it. At the end, we'll have a full Q&A section, but if I see any questions pop up as I'm going through, I'm happy to answer them. Okay. Genetic selection. Let's see here. Okay, so selecting the right genetics is about more than just potency and percentages. It's about matching the cultivar to your growing conditions and your desired effects. Some strains thrive in humid greenhouses, others in dry outdoor climates. Some have very short flowering periods, and so they would finish their cycle quickly, while others stretch and keep growing for 11 or 12 weeks, might not finish until November in a natural light cycle. So I encourage you to think of sativa indica as not just effects, but also as the plant shape we refer to as plant architecture, and also their photoperiod tendencies. Medicinal goals are also very important. Are you growing for pain relief, anxiety, sleep, inflammation, a specific medical condition? You would want to look for specific terpene and cannabinoid profiles aligned with those effects. Uh, I'll also explain the differences between regular feminized seeds, clone only lines, and what the pros and cons are there. And yeah, so talking about matching your genetics to the growing environment. If you are planning on growing indoors, it is a controlled environment. You're controlling the light cycle, the humidity, and the temperature. And so, in that case, if you have a sealed room, as in there's no windows, there's no way that light can get into that room, you could then choose to do a regular seed or a regular clone as opposed to an autoflower. A lot of new growers choose to start with autoflowers because then they don't have to control the light cycles. A little bit more about that when we talk about regular versus autoflower seed. Regular seeds and clones will flower when closer to 12 hours of night and 12 hours of daylight. And they will continue growing in their vegetative cycle, which is the first part of their growing cycle, when closer to 18 hours of daylight. And so that lines up outside being early summer, the days are very long, and the plant is in its vegetative cycle, growing upward and outward and putting on more branches and leaves. And then as the days get shorter in August, plants will naturally transition into their flower cycle and then start putting on buds. And when you're indoors, you're controlling that. When you're outdoors, you're at the whim of nature. And so you want to be aware of how long that flowering period is on that genetic. Sativas tend to flower for much longer. Indicas tend to flower for a shorter period of time. So if you live in a place where it rains outside, very early and often in the fall, you may want to find a shorter flowering period. If you're prone to anxiety, you may also want to tend towards an indica strain. If you are looking for something uplifting and creative, and you have a dry, arid climate, you could grow some sativas. Just some examples, some classic sativas would be things like hazes or chemdog or blue dream. Those are some common sativas. And some common indicas would be like hash plants, and most of the popular strains of the last 10 to 15 years have all been indica hybrids, really, cushes and things like that. Let's see, clone only lines are sometimes very helpful if you're after a very specific flavor. That being, let's say, you tried Super Boof at the store and you just loved it, and then you see that that store is selling a Super Boof clone. If you grow that clone and you grow it well, you will have a genetic expression that is similar to the jar that you had previously gotten. Whereas if you go and find super boof seeds, whether they're feminized or regular or anything else, you would get genetic variety when you hatch all those 6 or 12 or 20 seeds. And so, unless you're able to grow all of those out, you end up with kind of a mixed bag, which in some cases is desirable because you can find something that nobody's ever seen before. That's the beauty of regular seeds. But if you're looking for stability and predictability, clones are a bit better. Uh, Good seed stock is unrivaled in its vigor, vigor being how fast and strong the plant grows and how resistant they might be to problems like pests and mold. Uh, let's see here. Yeah, and so when you have a clone, you have to be very. There's a question in the chat I'm gonna answer. When you have a clone from, let's say, a dispensary or something like that, you want to be very careful with it. You want to keep it in proper temperature and humidity ranges. warm and humid, sort of like a seedling. And then you have to handle it very, very carefully, because if you bring it home and it goes into a super cold climate or a super dry climate, it will very quickly wilt, and it won't be viable anymore. So this is what I would call, this image you're looking at is what I call the basic morphology of the different plant types, sativa and indica. A common trait of indica is wide, broad-leafed um, leaf lobes, and sativas are usually narrow. Um, and like I mentioned earlier, sativas also tend to grow taller and longer. Okay. Uh, this is what is called a terpene wheel. And there's lots of them out there. And this is, all of the different types of aromas and flavors that can be found in nature, and also in cannabis. And so, sort of whatever it is that you're after, you can probably find it represented in a cannabis family. Um, I tend to I tend to lean towards strains that are known as being gassy, which is technically not even terpenes. It's getting into the range of volatile sulfur compounds. And so Chemdog, Sour, OG, that also has like sulfurous garlic type smells, which I see isn't listed on here as much. There's just skunk. But yeah, all those different flavors and aromas can have different effects on your head. So pretty amazing. And then now on to my favorite part, which is garden prep. And in the later editions of this workshop, we're going to get into a lot more garden prep. But being as we are going into the winter season, we're just going to kind of get an overview, and I'm going to speak more towards the indoor process, as anybody right now would probably be planning to do that. Um, as you can see here, you want to assess your site for sunlight, airflow, and compliance, meaning you don't want to, have a bunch of plants in your backyard and piss off your neighbors. Make sure you're allowed to do what you plan to do. Uh, Sunlight is a matter of finding your south sky and finding the biggest access to the southern sky that you can in your area. If you don't have, if you're blocked by tall trees directly to the south, you may have trouble growing there, or you may just, get small plants. Um, Airflow is very important. You don't want to just jam your plants in between a bunch of trees or in between some tomatoes. You want to give them lots of space. The same would apply inside. If you're going to put a plant in a closet or a tent in a garage or something like that, it needs to have access to fresh air, whether it's coming in just from the house or whether you put in a fan and ducting to pull in fresh air from the outdoors. Otherwise, you will be overrun with fungal pathogens and molds and things like that. Your next thing to consider is your growing medium. One option is to build in living soil, or you could buy a high quality blend. I suggest things like compost, worm castings with aeration, and perlite and pumice, fertilizers of choice. There's so many different options out there. We'll get more into that a little bit later. After you blend your ingredients, you do want to cook your mix for 2 to 3 weeks, meaning you let all those ingredients kind of jive. After adding fertilizers to compost and worm castings and all that other good stuff, it can sometimes get a little bit warm. The soil will actually raise the temperature. And what that is microbes starting to create life and propagate. And so you want to let that process happen before you put a plant in there. So you give 2 to 3 weeks before planting after blending your soil. You want to set up your water filtration and irrigation. If you're on city water, highly recommend you get a carbon filter and maybe even a tank to bubble the water, as you would be dealing with chlorine and chloramine. If you are on a well, having basic sediment filtration is helpful. Irrigation strategies can be as simple as a bucket and a water pitcher, and that works great. Or you can put a storage tank for water and pump and put in drip lines. There's many, many different ways to do that. Indoors, for a couple of plants, really a bucket and a pitcher is sufficient. Um, when planning your irrigation system, you may want to consider inputs like compost teas and microbial inoculants. You can make compost tea in a bucket and just pour it onto the roots of your plant with a pitcher very easily. What compost tea is kind of a slurry of active, healthy composts that comes with lots of healthy, beneficial bacteria and biology. And so that will create a healthy living soil, which then in turn helps to consume the organic matter and the fertilizer you've put in there and feed it to your plant. Again, I mentioned planning for airflow and humidity management and light indoors. And if you're planning for outdoors, you want to make plans around your pest management, mulch management, and trellis. Trellis meaning things to tie your plant to when it gets tall and heavy so it doesn't fall over. This time of year, in terms of garden preparation, I'm going to put up a pretty picture while I talk. This is a great time of year to get cover crop seed and compost onto your outdoor beds, and then use the free water that falls from the sky to help churn the compost into your soil, bring the worms to the surface, and then cover crop will grow and create a habitat for lots of healthy biology. It's also a good time of year to do compost tea applications, even to your empty outdoor planting beds. And that would apply to cannabis, tomatoes, cucumbers, anything and everything. Because just because we're done growing what we want in that garden doesn't mean it's done doing its work. At the very least, you should get mulch over all of your planting surfaces, mulch being rice straw or alfalfa straw or something along those lines, whatever you have available to you, to prevent nutrient leaching and runoff when all the rain falls down in the winter. If you've been trying to build a soil and you've added lots of good stuff, you want to protect it, and that mulch is like an armor layer. So question, yes, the amount of water absolutely changes throughout the different cycles of the plant. Mostly, this is going back to, seedlings in a small little cup would only need a splash of water every 3, 4, 5 days even. But then as the roots fill up the container that it's in, they will require more water. It's not so much that a plant needs more water in veg or bloom or less water in veg or bloom. It's more that as the plant gets bigger, it needs proportional amounts of water. But every time, we'll be getting into this in the later portions, when we transplant or up pot from the red solo cup shown here. Oh, nope, let me go back. So this is where they all start. And then once they've grown in these cups to be about 8, 10 inches tall, maybe have a couple sets of leaves, you'd be up potting them into what is called a 1 gallon pot, which is about 6 or 7 inches across, 6, 7 inches tall. And so you continuously give it a larger root space and you build a larger root ball. Then whether if you're going to flower it indoors, you would probably give it a 3 gallon pot as its final home. If you're planting it outdoors, it depends on the time of year. And why I bring this up is when you transplant into a larger container, is you only give a small amount of water at first because it's very easy to overwater a small plant in a big pot. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, a couple pretty pictures. You can see these are my greenhouses, and I think that's a row of corn pictured there in the front. You can see lots of diversity. Diversity is important in an outdoor garden as it provides habitat for beneficial insects and just increases overall soil health when there's a diverse set of plants growing in the soil. This here is a picture of me digging in my worm bins. These are wooden bins that I fill with compost made from alpaca manure. And I run red wiggler worms through there. It's actually a mix of red wigglers and native earthworms. And so this is something everyone can do at home on a smaller scale. You don't need manure. You can use kitchen waste and rake up leaves from the trees. And garden waste is fantastic. And you too can have your own little worm farm and produce your own good biological fertilizer. Those guys on the left, those are my alpacas. They are my manure source for my composts. And let's see. Okay. That would conclude my presentation. And I am now officially opening it up to question and answer.
Cool. That's awesome, Daniel. There is a question here. Um, how often to add worms into compost, or the natural reproduction will keep it up, or will the natural reproduction keep it up?
Okay, so if you have a compost pile going outside and it's on the earth and you've got worms in it, it's really just a matter of adding fresh organic matter and keeping it watered. Red wiggler worms don't need to be added back into a compost repeatedly. They kind of have an interesting thing. They'll control their own population based on the amount of food available. So if you keep layering on more manure to your compost pile and more food scraps or whatever you've got, those worms will continue to grow and thrive. In my planting beds, um, I basically see big cycles of worm activity. In the wet season, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of worms. They come up to the surface to eat on the decomposing cover crop. And then in the dry season, they all go very deep, and I don't see as much activity. But I don't have to keep adding them. Once you've established a good, healthy population of worms in your garden, or let's say, if you're indoors and you make a big pot inside, you can keep a worm population happy in there. You just got to give them food to eat.
Nice. I have a two-part question. The first one is the paper towel method. How long do you germinate the seeds? And then what do you do once they are germinated? That's the first question.
Yes. So paper towel method, if you're in the right temperature range, should only take a day or two, maybe 24 hours if the seeds are healthy. And some people do like to leave them in the paper towel a little bit longer, but it gets risky because then the root can tangle itself into the paper towel. So you want to catch it before the root tangles itself in there. And then you would immediately take that and place it root down into a depression in that red solo cup. So you would just make a little depression in your soil in that red solo cup, and just barely bury it by about a millimeter, with the root facing downward.
Cool. Okay, thank you. And then the second question I have are for let's say you do the clone method, and you get clones from someone. What are the materials that are needed to ensure that your clones stay in a warm and humid environment? Are there like trays, kits?
Yes.
Is there like a gel you'd recommend? Anything like that to help with the cloning?
Yeah. Well, the gel you reference is cloning gel, and that's actually for the rooting process. So you won't need that. But yeah, there's a thing called a seedling heat mat, which can be very helpful. It's great for germinating vegetable seeds and keeping baby plants of all varieties happy. It's very little bit of electricity, and it's just a flat, thin rubber mat. And so you would take your clone home. It would likely, the plant is that big in a small cube, like that plug I pictured earlier, or maybe a cube of what's called rock wool, which is not my favorite stuff. It dries out very, very quickly. So you'd want to get that home and you'd plant it in the solo cup or maybe a 1 gallon pot, um, just so the soil surface is just to the top of the plug. And then you would put that container on your seedling heat mat under a gentle light when they're freshly transplanted, that again do not need much light at all. And you'd want to make sure that you keep that clone on 18 or more hours of light, because clones are photosensitive. They're photoperiod sensitive, so their light cycle needs to be managed at all times. If you want a clone to continue growing, you have to keep it under 18 hours or more of daylight. And then if you're ready to let it flower, you would give it 12 hours. I'll just mention, if it's the springtime and you get a clone from the store and the days are still short and the plant's getting kind of big and you want to get it out of your kitchen, you can put it outside during the day and then even just turn a porch light on it for until midnight to keep its days long. Or what some people do is they'll bring it inside with a desk lamp at night and then bring it back out during the day. And so that's a good way to prevent them from getting cold shock in the springtime as well. Obviously, that's like babying your plant, but some people like to do it.
That makes sense. Another just real quick part to that question. What if some folks already have plants and they like their genetics and they like everything that's been happening and they want to clone their own plants and they just want to snip off the top? In that case, is there a different process to doing so?
Yeah, so cloning is a delicate process. First and foremost, you have to regulate your environment. You have to have that humid, warm environment like we talked about that's very consistent, and then you would get a seedling tray, which is black plastic planting tray, and a clear dome that would fit on top of it to manage the humidity. And then you would get it's called a plug insert, which is the grid that fits inside the tray. And I would recommend peat plugs, like I pictured earlier. And that has a little hole in it. You cut a top portion of a branch about this big with a nice, healthy stem. Um, and you have to buy a product. One option is called Clonex, or many different options. It's the rooting hormone. And so you then dip the clone into the hormone and then push that stem into the peat plug. Then you place the peat plug in the tray with the covered dome. Cloning is something that can be very challenging if you haven't practiced. It's mostly about environmental control and taking a cutting off of a healthy vegging plant. You cannot take an effective clone off of a flowering plant. And so that's kind of annoying because sometimes you don't know if you wanted to keep it until you flowered it. If that's the case, it would be called re-vegging. Let's say you threw some seeds in the yard. One of them was just the best thing ever. You would cut that plant down to one growing node and one leaf. So you cut a huge plant down to a tiny little plant and you cut out a portion of its roots. Then you would actually transplant those roots into some fresh soil, put it under 24 hours of light, and then you have to wait about 2 months. It will go very, very, very slowly, but that is a way that you can continue growing a seed plant or a clone that you've just flowered. It's something that people deploy when they have to. And taking clones is challenging. There's probably some really good I would even guess YouTube tutorials on the full cloning procedure, because there's a number of different products you can add into the mix to increase your success rate. Um, as a beginner, I'll just say this as a new person trying to take clones, if you cut 50 clones and rooted two of them, you did a great job. Uh, so uh, yeah, if you're near a dispensary that sells clones, then consider yourself lucky, I guess.
Cool. Thank you for that, Daniel. There
For
is
sure.
another question here. With clones, are there any specific IPM measures that you think have no wiggle room?
Yeah, yeah. So IPM, for those that don't know, is integrated pest management. Bugs love cannabis. And so there's things like aphids and spider mites and a number of others that travel very easily on clones. And so when getting a clone from a dispensary or from a friend or from wherever, let's assume it's in a plug, and so the whole thing is this big. Uh, a good method to make sure it's clean before you bring it into the rest of your garden is you get a bucket or a small bucket, and you uh, there's really good products out there that are very clean. Plant soaps and citric acid and alcohol, things like that, are very generally recognized as safe in plant care. And so you'd put a couple ounces of, like I said, plant soap, alcohol, citric acid into a bucket, and you'd submerge the entire clone, leaves and roots, in that solution. Um, some and you take it and you shake it under the water. You can even gently massage the leaves under this soapy water, and that will remove any possible eggs or living bugs that may have come with it, and uh, remove any fungal pathogens and things like that.
Awesome. Thanks for that question. All right, we still have about 20 minutes left. There's room for Q&A. Anything that you want Daniel to repeat? There's no question that's too small or too large. Anything you want clarified? We'd love to answer your questions here while we have the opportunity. So feel free to ask your questions. If you want to ask your question, you can raise your hand to talk. The way you do that is on the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a button that says raise hand. And if you press that button, I can press the button that allows you to speak your question. Any of those methods work, but let us know if you have any other questions. Okay, what am I doing wrong when the seedling grows too fast and will fall over if it doesn't get supported until it gets strength?
Okay, so if the seedling falls over, um, then it sounds like that was what I was calling damping off. Oh, this isn't working. Never mind. It sounds like what I was calling damping. Okay, well, sorry. Okay, I'm back. Um, Damping off is when there's actually too much humidity and it's potentially overwatering. And so if there's too much humidity when the plant is small, or it's been watered every day and it's not drying out, then it will just fall over and die. The other um, the other thing that it could potentially be is not enough light. Once the plant is about that big and is starting to show two small sets of leaves, you want to start increasing the light incrementally, um, because otherwise what happens is called a tealation, which is when the plant stretches and it stays very skinny, and so it's not actually getting enough light to photosynthesize and make itself strong. So that sounds like what you might be dealing with.
Let us know if that answered your question, Paul. We can clarify if you need more support. We have a question from Mikey. In his water, he can smell the chlorine in tap water sometimes. And can you give tips for a new grower on that is using well water, setting it up, dechlorinated, et cetera?
Yeah. So bubbling your water will help evaporate a certain amount of chlorine. Most municipal water has also chloramine, which is you can't bubble it off. Um, so bubbling will take care of chlorine. Humic acids, liquid humic acids in very, very, very small amounts can help to bind with chlorine and chloramine. So that's actually a really good option if you're just stuck with city water and that's what you got is fill yourself a barrel or a bucket of that water and then you're going to add a liquid humic acid, which is a very dark black liquid, just until the water has the tiniest tint of yellow to it. So it's a very small amount and that will actually bind with the chlorine and chloramine. If you're on a well, then it likely comes with some amount of minerals that are natural in the groundwater. It could be iron or calcium bicarbonate, and those things can cause problems long term with your plants as well. Most commonly, pleated filters and 5 micron fiber filters are the most common ways to filter that. Carbon filtration would be the next step up, which can help remove additional odor. Um, and yeah, I'm big on testing, actual analytical testing and seeing really what's in the water because different filters work better for certain minerals. Um, and yeah, when growing outside, you need a lot more water typically, and so people will usually have 100 or a 500 or more gallon storage tank. And so you would set up your filtration going into that storage tank so you always have lots of filtered water on hand. Hope that answered your question.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Mikey, and thanks for that explanation, Daniel. There's one more question here. What are the best pH ranges for seedlings and clones?
Yeah, so pH is, for those that don't know, is the acid base scale, alkalinity, um, and uh, things like lemon juice are very low. They're very acidic. Uh, Cannabis nutrient uptake, the ideal range for most of the nutrients is about 6.2 to 6.4. If your water comes in at anywhere around there, anywhere between 6.2 and 6.6, even down to 6.0 to 6.6 is perfectly acceptable. Even if it's as high as 7, that's also perfectly acceptable. 7 is neutral water. And you you just don't want something to the extremes. If you're using synthetic nutrients, the alkalinity is much more important in the nutrient solution. Let's say your water is creeping up towards 7 or 7.1 or 2, and you're using synthetic nutrients in that water, you will limit the uptake of certain minerals. Whereas if you're in a nice organic soil with lots of natural biology, your water can vary quite a bit more and the biology will buffer the alkalinity. But clones somewhere around 6.4 in the water. But again, they can handle something as low as 6 or as high as 7.
Awesome. Thank you. And Willie, I see your hand is up. Just give me one moment. There's one more question here, and then I will press the button to allow you to talk. So the other question from Rabid P is RO watering, sorry, RO water for watering, or is regular filtered water better?
Great question. So RO water is reverse osmosis, also referred to as zero water. It's an advanced filtration process that takes everything out of the water. RO water is great, but it can also be wasteful. If you're small scale, it's not a big deal. At larger scales, there's a certain amount of wastewater that's created when you make your zero water. So at small scale, it might not be a big deal. If you are using RO water, for your plants, you always want to remineralize with a baseline of calcium and magnesium, um, usually to the tune of 80 parts per million, which is basically a little tiny drop of a product called CalMag in all of your water. Uh, and that is because if you use pure RO water at all times, then you're actually stripping the minerals from your soil base with any of the water that leaks out the bottom of the pot. Um, I do prefer RO water for foliar applications when I'm spraying a plant with food, but we haven't talked about that today. Um, and if your water is really, really, really bad, sometimes RO is the only option. Um, and yeah, happy to answer more specific questions about that if you got any.
All right, thank you for that question. Willie, go ahead and talk if you are still there.
Okay, I am.
Okay.
Um, I was really intrigued by your worm boxes. I have a 4 foot by 5 foot worm box that I've had for about 25 years, and I've just used a mixture of native soil and bagged compost and different light soil mixes to add to it. And of course, it's very enriched now. We use all our our home waste in it. I just dig a ditch and add it in there, and it disappears in 2 to 3 weeks. But my
Yep.
dilemma is the stuff is so good, I'm always pinching it off the top for the garden, for plants of many different types, because it's magic. But is there something better to add to that? What material would be the best to keep building it up because it's getting lower and lower?
This is your planting bed.
No, this is in my worm box
This is your worm box.
because I'm
Yeah.
always pinching
Well,
off of it.
so it's really a matter of what do you have ready access to. This time of year, there's tons of leaves falling from the tree. That makes for great fodder for a worm bin. Manures are great as long as it's not coming from, let's say, a horse farm that recently used dewormer. Gut medicine for horses and things like that. That can hurt your worms. Kitchen scraps are great. I'm just gonna guess. Are you Nevada County?
Yes.
So there's numerous restaurants in town that are constantly looking for people to take their compost waste. I participated in some of that. And if you can commit to showing up every week, you can get a truckload of kitchen waste that worms will eat right up. It is helpful to also have chickens for certain things that aren't so good for worms. Um, but yeah, there's even even grass. I've harvested tall grass and made my own bales and fed that. And this time of year, you can also find extremely cheap, slightly moldy bales of grass at the feed stores that they're trying to clear out. That can also make for great worm food. Um, there's many options. Just think about clean waste streams essentially.
If I'm using horse manure, do I have to be careful that it's not too hot?
Nope, you don't have to worry about the horse manure being hot, but you just want to make sure that the source hasn't given them deworming medication anytime recently.
Okay. Those are
Uh,
some good ideas. Thank you very much. My worms are my best friends.
yeah, I'm all about the worms. That's awesome. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you for your question, Willie. Okay, so we have about 5 more minutes. Anybody else have any other questions before we wrap up here and sign off? Um, this is a great time to ask any last minute questions, anything that's racking your brain, any clarification. All right, we have a question from Judy. Let's see. Go ahead, Judy.
I would like to know if this Zoom meeting can be repeated. Can it be looked at again?
Yep, this was recorded and will be available on the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance website.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, to speak a little bit more about that, we will be posting this on our website, but also we have a YouTube channel. I will post that in the chat right now, actually. It's through Nevada County Media, and they're amazing. Let me see if I can copy and paste this in the chat. There we go. And just save that link, and you can just check back regularly to see if the link has been posted. We'll also share it on our Instagram and Facebook pages, so feel free to follow us there. And as well as subscribing to our newsletter at nccannabisalliance.org/subscribe. And we will post all the updates from our webinars on there as well. And there is actually another question here from Paul. Are you familiar with black soldier flies?
Yeah, yeah, black soldier flies. Black soldier fly larva is a common homegrown nutrient source because you can grow lots of larvae on kitchen scraps, on small amounts of waste, and their poo, also called frass, black soldier fly frass, is a really, really good fertilizer. And plus, if you have chickens, then the chickens eat the grubs, and you get frass, and takes care of all your kitchen scraps. Black soldier flies are great. If you're, yeah, if you've got a lot of kitchen scraps, that's a good way to go.
Okay, awesome. All right, everyone. If you have any last pressing questions, let us know. But I think we're going to wrap up here. That was awesome, Daniel. That was a lot of information. Is there any way that people can, keep in touch, or if there's any questions that they may have, if that's something, or a website they can visit, anything that you have for as a resource for them?
Yeah, if you're on Instagram, social media, Down Ohm Farms, DOWNOM Farms on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook as Daniel Fink, and also Down Ohm Farms. Downohmfarms at gmail.com if you have any really specific questions. I love talking plants and soil all day, every day.
And I will add in, thank you so much, Daniel. And if you are at Elevation, our dispensary in Nevada City, or if you are in Grass Valley at Provisions, you can pick up some of the delicious cannabis that is grown by Daniel down Ohm Farms. Ask for it. It's really special, high quality boutique cannabis grown right here on the ridge. So you can get local product, local cannabis from Daniel right here in town at our local dispensaries.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Daniel.
Yeah, I think Provisions will have fresh batches in the next couple of weeks. So thank
And,
you.
ele-
Appreciate
and
that.
Elevation is stocked.
No, they're not at the moment, but go in there and ask for it, and then maybe they will.
There you go.
Great. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay,
Awesome.
thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel, and thanks everyone for joining us. And stay tuned for part 2, which is happening on January 8th. The link is in the chat to register, so make sure you join us for the next part of this webinar. Thank you so much, Daniel, and thanks everyone. Have a great day.